In the fall of 2020, a Pennsylvania homeowner named Heather O'Malley stepped into her backyard and found a Chinese praying mantis with its forelegs wrapped around a spotted lanternfly mid-meal. She did what a lot of people in the quarantine zone had started doing that year. She took a photo and sent it to Penn State. She was one of hundreds of people submitting images of birds, insects, mammals, and even fish eating the destructive planthopper that had been spreading across the state since 2014. At the time, nobody at the university treated her photo as anything more than a nice submission. It was one data point in a pile of them. What nobody fully understood yet was how large that pile was about to get. Or that, 6 years before O'Malley ever picked up her phone, something had already been fighting this insect without anyone noticing at all. This video draws on published research from Penn State University's College of Agricultural Sciences, the Journal of Insect Science, the Journal Arthropod-Plant Interactions, the Journal of Chemical Ecology, Entomological News, the USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, and reporting from the Natural History Museum, WHYY, and Growing Produce covering the ongoing search for the spotted lanternfly's natural enemies. Spotted lanternfly, like Lycorma delicicula, isn't actually a fly. It's a planthopper, more closely related to cicadas and aphids than to houseflies, native to China, and first confirmed in the United States in a stone supplier's yard in Berks County, Pennsylvania, in September 2014. It has since spread across at least 18 states, causing serious damage to vineyards, orchards, and nursery industries. It's a highly polyphagous insect, feeding on more than 170 plant species across 33 families, though its clear favorite is tree of heaven, itself an invasive species from China, meaning the insect essentially imported its own preferred habitat before it ever arrived. Pennsylvania wasn't the first place this insect had shown up outside Asia. An outbreak was first reported in South Korea in 2004, and the population spread rapidly through the country's central region, causing serious damage to grape vineyards. By 2011, its distribution had expanded throughout South Korea entirely. American entomologists watched that timeline with a specific kind of dread, because it previewed almost exactly what was about to happen at home. Grape vineyards in both South Korea and the United States turned out to be particularly vulnerable, threatening an industry worth billions of dollars, and at least one U.S. vineyard reportedly lost up to 90% of its yield to the pest. A 2019 study estimated that if left uncontained, spotted lanternfly could drain Pennsylvania's economy of up to $324 million a year and cost the state roughly 2,800 jobs. This wasn't hypothetical. Anywhere it had already landed, the life cycle is part of what makes it so hard to stop. In fall, females lay egg masses coated in a gray, mud-like secretion that hardens into something that looks less like an insect nest and more like a smear of dried putty on bark, stone, or metal siding. That disguises the problem. Egg masses have been intercepted on shipping containers, vehicles, outdoor furniture, and firewood moved across state lines by people who had no idea they were transporting next spring's infestation with them. When nymphs hatch, they feed by piercing plant tissue and drawing out sap in volumes the plant can't spare, excreting the excess as a sticky honeydew that grows a black sooty mold capable of blocking photosynthesis on everything beneath it. Pennsylvania's response was fast and unusually public. See it, squash it became an actual state agriculture campaign. Yard signs, gas station posters, county fair banners. Extension offices ran workshops teaching residents to scrape egg masses off bark before they hatched. Highway checkpoints inside the quarantine zone inspected commercial vehicles for hitchhiking insects. Businesses operating in the zone needed permits certifying their employees knew how to check cargo before travel. For the first 2 years, it looked exactly like the kind of fight regulators had already lost once, an ocean away, in Korea. A race between how fast humans could scrape and inspect, and how fast an insect that travels passively on almost any outdoor surface could spread. What almost nobody realized at the time was that the race had a third competitor nobody had entered on purpose. In 2016, two Pennsylvania entomologists, Lawrence Barringer and Stephen Smyers, documented something odd while surveying infested trees. A predatory wheel bug and a native stink bug called Apocylus sinicus, both already feeding on adult spotted lanternflies in the wild, published that year in Entomological News. It was the earliest documented case of any native North American insect attacking this pest, just 2 years after the insect had even been confirmed in the country. But that wasn't the strangest discovery that year. Also in 2016, researcher Hooping Liu was surveying spotted lanternfly egg masses in the Pennsylvania quarantine zone when he recovered something unexpected from inside them. the larvae of a parasitic wasp that had no business being there at all. Genetic and physical testing confirmed the wasp as Uenceotis cuvinei, a species that primarily targets gypsy moth eggs and was deliberately introduced into North America all the way back in 1908 to help control that unrelated pest. It was, as far as the researchers could tell, the first time this wasp had ever been documented parasitizing a host outside the moth family it had spent over a century specializing in. Liu and his co-author gave the discovery a title that says everything about how strange it was. An old remedy for a new problem, a weapon imported to fight a completely different insect over 100 years earlier, for a war that had nothing to do with lanternflies, had apparently adapted on its own to attack the new arrival the moment it showed up. At the sites where it was found, the wasp was parasitizing roughly 7% of egg masses and about 20% of the eggs within those masses. Not enough to stop an invasion outright, but proof that reinforcements didn't have to be imported from Asia. Some of them had already been living in Pennsylvania's forests for a century, waiting for a reason to notice this insect at all. That finding didn't get the same attention the population decline numbers were getting. Damage was still climbing every season, and 100-year-old wasp parasitizing 7% of egg masses at a handful of sites wasn't going to make headlines next to Vineyards losing 90% of their yield. For a few more years, the dominant story stayed the same one it had always been: spread, damage, quarantine expansion. Then, in 2020, during COVID lockdowns, Penn State entomology professor Kelly Hoover ran a citizen science survey asking a simple question: was anything else out there eating this bug? The responses came in faster than her team could process them. Almost 2,000 reports of animals feeding on spotted lanternfly across the quarantine zone. Heather O'Malley's mantis photo was part of the first wave, formally analyzed and published by Hoover and Penn State doctoral candidate Ann Johnson. Out of the first 660 photos and observations submitted, chickens and praying mantises came out in a virtual photo finish for most commonly reported predator. Cardinals, catbirds, blue jays, and tufted titmice rounded out the top bird predators, while yellow jackets, orb weaver spiders, wheel bugs, and ants were the strongest arthropod contenders. And then there were the ones nobody predicted at all. Reports came in of squirrels, bats, frogs, goldfish, and even a garter snake eating spotted lanternflies, a fish eating a flying insect. Johnson's reaction to that particular oddity was almost matter of fact. Since the animals reporting them were already predators of one kind or another, it made sense that they'd try an abundant new food source once it appeared. That raised the same question the 2016 wheel bug and wasp discoveries had already hinted at. Was any of this actually slowing the insect down, or just opportunistic snacking on the side? Here's where the story gets a genuine complication, because spotted lanternfly isn't defenseless. A separate study led by Penn State entomologists, published in the Journal of Chemical Ecology, found that several bird species were less likely to eat lanternflies that had specifically fed on Tree of Heaven. The insect appears to sequester bitter defensive compounds from its favorite host plant, the same way monarch butterflies borrow toxins from milkweed and store them in its own body as a kind of edible warning label. If that held true everywhere, it would mean the predation Johnson and Hoover were documenting might quietly stall out anywhere near a heavy Tree of Heaven stand, which describes most infestation sites in the country. So researchers pushed the question into a controlled lab setting. They tested 10 generalist predators already living in the eastern U.S. Spined soldier bugs, praying mantises, wheel bugs, lady beetles, and lacewings, to see which would actually take down a spotted lanternfly outside of a lucky backyard encounter. The results, published in Arthropod Plant Interactions, showed spined soldier bugs, a native predatory stink bug, along with Carolina and Chinese mantises, were particularly effective at feeding on the pest. Johnson had gone in expecting the toxin issue to matter more than it apparently did. Her working theory was that the stored chemical defense might explain some predator reluctance, but the lab data showed several native generalists eating the insect anyway, toxins and all. Hoover was careful not to oversell what any of this meant. She described the insects as generalist predators taking advantage of an abundant new food source rather than specialized natural enemies, noting their impact could be limited by prey availability and by insecticide use that also kills these same beneficial predators. Her stated conclusion was that these predators belonged inside a broader integrated pest management strategy, not as a standalone fix. That's the same caveat every biologist working in invasive species reversal ends up repeating. Pressure isn't the same as control, which is exactly why a separate team wasn't relying on wheel bugs and wandering wasps at all. They were trying to import the real thing deliberately from the insect's home range. In China, spotted lanternfly rarely becomes a serious pest, largely because of the parasitoids that already keep it in check there. USDA researchers began evaluating candidates for potential release in the US, including Anastatis orientalis, an egg parasitoid that had already shown promise as a biological control tool in South Korea, the same country that first previewed this entire invasion back in 2004. On paper, it looked like the cleanest possible fix, a wasp that had evolved for millions of years specifically to attack this exact insect's eggs, ready to be shipped over and released across the same quarantine states still running egg-scraping campaigns every fall. Then US testing found a problem. Researchers discovered Anastatis orientalis lacked the host specificity needed for safe release. It readily attacked the eggs of native silk moths as well, not just spotted lanternfly. That finding ruled the wasp out as a release candidate in the United States, despite its earlier success overseas. It's the same kind of failure that has ended biological control programs before they started elsewhere. An agent that works perfectly against the target and turns out to be dangerously non-selective against everything else. Import the wrong insect to fight an invasion, and instead of solving one problem, you risk creating a second. Researchers shifted focus to a different species, a nymphal parasitoid, with a formal release petition expected in early 2026. Though the federal review process for something like this can take 1 to 3 years before any release is approved. So, as of right now, there is still no deliberately imported biological control agent operating against spotted lanternfly anywhere in the United States. Everything documented in this video, the 2016 wheel bug, the century-old wasp nobody released on purpose, the mantises, the chickens, the garter snake, the spine soldier bugs, is happening entirely on its own. That's the part worth sitting with. For the first 2 years after the 2014 discovery in Berks County, every report on this insect was about spread. How many new counties? How many hundreds of millions of dollars at risk in vineyards and hardwoods? The same trajectory Korea had already lived through a decade earlier. Nobody was looking for predators, because in 2014 or 2015, nobody had any real reason to expect one. Then in 2016, almost as a footnote to the damage reports, researchers found a wheel bug already eating adults, and a wasp imported for an entirely different war, already attacking eggs. 4 years after that, a professor asked a simple question during a lockdown and got nearly 2,000 answers instead of a handful. None of this means the fight is over. The quarantine zones are still expanding. Egg-scraping campaigns still run every fall. The predators documented so far are generalists doing what generalists do when a new food source shows up in bulk, not specialists engineered to end an invasion. And the one wasp that might have done that job fastest turned out to be too dangerous to release. But 10 years ago, the honest answer to what eats a spotted lanternfly in America was close to nothing. Today, it's a list that started with a wheel bug, and a century-old immigrant wasp nobody remembered was still out there. And it keeps growing every season researchers bother to look for it.